All right, all right. Good morning, NACo. Good morning, NACo. All right, happy Valentine's Day again, and we're just joined by our next guest, which is no stranger to any of us. This is a strong partner for us as we move forward in infrastructure and talk about rail and bridges and just trails in our community. Since our Secretary Buttigieg was sworn in as the 19th Secretary of last year, we're pleased to welcome him to our annual conference. And this past July, he met us and discussed transportation and infrastructure priorities. And now we bring up our secretary, who's a local guy, who's on the national level, who understands what counties have to go through. Please join us and welcome our secretary, Mr. Pete Buttigieg.
Hi.
Hey, good sir. You're good?
Good morning. All right. A lively group.
That's right. Mr. Secretary, thank you for taking our time in your busy schedule just to be part of us. And you know we've been through the pandemic for the last 2 years. And one question I like to ask is always to inspire us. You move from local to national. And just give us just a few insights on how some of that experience has been, because people want to do like you did one day.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for your leadership and everything that NACo is doing. I enjoyed partnering with NACo when I was a mayor, that much more so in this role. The best way to answer your question, I think, is to share that when I was a mayor, I believed that local government was where things got done.
Right.
I really believe that to be the case. And what I can tell you is now that I'm in federal government, I know that to be the case. At the end of the day, you have to deliver. You are accountable to people who know where you live. They don't hesitate to let you know their concerns about whatever is happening in their neighborhood, their community, their workplace, whether you're in charge of it or not, right? They want it fixed, they want it dealt with, and they will inform you at the grocery, at the dog park, at the town hall, or anywhere in between. And so I view our role as a federal agency as making it possible for you to deliver, right? If everything's going well in the counties, in the towns, and in the cities, then everything's going well across the country.
Beautiful.
That is easier said than done, but that's exactly what I think we're here to talk about. And this time, we're coming to this conversation with a lot of resources to help you get it done.
And we appreciate that. That $1.3 trillion is going to do a lot to impact our counties. As you know, counties own half the roads, 4 out of 10 bridges. Talk about the local, the partnership on how we can work with you to get these dollars directly to our citizens.
Well, it's one thing to have the funding approved.
Right.
And that's a big deal. And by the way, I want to thank all of you. And there were a lot of Democrats, independents, and Republicans who spoke in unison, something doesn't happen very often these days, about just how important it was to get this bipartisan infrastructure law passed. That's why we have the funding. And it wouldn't have happened without voices like NACo and voices like your individual voices out there. So now that part's in place. But of course, the great risk with any deployment of taxpayer dollars is the risk of not seeing $1.3 trillion of value delivered to the American people.
That's right.
So what does it mean to actually make sure that happens? Well, we got to be on time, on task, on budget with all of these programs. And very few of them are owned and operated by any federal agency, right? We will deliver the funding, we will set the standards, we will establish the partnerships, and then it'll be up to the state and local leaders to actually make it happen, to do the procurement, to do the hiring, to prioritize the projects.
Right.
Now, I know a lot of my colleagues are here, and please make sure when you see anybody from the Department of Transportation to get to know them, because they are the connective tissue that are going to help you interface with us as a department. And whether we're talking about the electric vehicle program and getting those chargers where they need to be,
Right.
Whether we're talking about traditional bread and butter work like the highway and bridge dollars that are going out, or things we've never even done before, like the resilience funding that's happening, it's going to be critically important to have counties ready to express to your own states, as well as to us,
Right.
where the highest priorities are. And it's going to be critically important for us to be user-friendly in helping you apply for those funds, and there are a considerable share of them that are directly routed to local project sponsors and not just going through the states or the MPOs.
Right, and you as a local official, you know the challenges that we face on trying to break sometimes these federal juggernauts to get money through. But what I like about what you've done is that we have a call that we do with your department to talk about infrastructure, to get some of our questions out, so you're being proactive. Tell us about other strategies that you're going to use to make sure that we can get that bridge, that road, that out fixed, some of the innovations that you all are doing to make sure we can have a better conversation.
Well, first of all, we're just trying to make the process a little bit simpler. We are creating about 40 new programs because of the bipartisan infrastructure law just in my department alone. And we're growing some of our most important and popular programs, like the RAISE program, formerly known as BUILD, formerly known as TIGER. I guess there's a rule with new administration, you got to have a new acronym. And one of the things we realize, of course, is if you don't have the staff to navigate 40 different application processes for 40 different programs. So one of the things we're looking at, for example, on 3 of our key programs, the Mega Projects Fund, Infra, which is one in particular that you should be looking at, especially if there's a lot of goods movement or supply chain issues that come through your community, and our Rural program, which is another one where counties are going to be playing such a key role. We're going to try to have a common notice of funding opportunity, basically the equivalent of the common application for college applications, so you don't have to put the exact same piece of information on 10 different forms. Same idea for our grant processes. We're going to try to have a level of human conversation too, right, that maybe hasn't happened before. So I would particularly encourage you to get to know parts of our department like the Build America Bureau, which has a dedicated fund for technical assistance that is available to help you navigate some of our processes. I would encourage you to take liberal advantage of any word that goes out that we're going to have conference calls, webinars, Zooms, any kind of event on how to navigate these processes. Bottom line is we need to have a better front door for local government trying to get things done. That's the direct part. Let's talk about the indirect part for a second, because a lot of the funding does go through the states. I promise you, I will urge the states to listen to local leaders as you're making clear the priorities that are going to happen. Yes. Whether it's the electric vehicle program where they got to bring a plan to us, whether it's the deployment of these bridge dollars. And on something like the bridge dollars, the law was very well crafted in terms of having set-asides to make sure that off-system bridges, for example, get attention, because we know they don't always get as much attention in the state capital.
Right.
In best case scenario, you have great alignment between state and local government. And if you happen to live in one of those communities where that's going on, good on you. If you don't, we still want to be able to serve and help your community. And so there are ways for local governments to come directly to the department if there's something that you don't think is getting enough attention through the regular formula process.
Well, and to stay on that line of questioning, 70% of the counties are rural counties.
Right.
And they may not have the resources to write the grant, have a grant writer, or to deal with the resources because, federal government is so big and a lot of red tape. Talk to our rural communities on how are you planning to make sure that they can be at the table and get the resources in a timely manner to help them as well.
Yeah, so this is very important to us. Mm-hmm. And we're doing it in two ways. Dedicated programming for rural communities. So think of the Routes program, for example, and definitely get to know that program if you haven't already. It's about specifically making sure that we're funding rural opportunities. One of the three programs I just mentioned that we're putting into that common application is a rural surface transportation program, specifically about supporting rural communities. But also in our flagship programs, we often have now a dedicated subset of that is a floor for how much goes to rural. And often it's a high floor. For example, that RAISE program, which just grew by about $500 million a year nationwide, thanks to the president's law. At least 50% of that has to go to rural communities. Wow. So we beat that in this last round, and that was on purpose. So we're gonna go out of our way to make sure that there are adequate levels of support that can't just get gobbled up by the bigger You think about the bridge opportunity, right? We have promised to fix the 10 most economically significant bridges in the country, and that's going to be a very important project. But there are about 15,000 bridges that we can fix with the funding that we have. And as you know, if you are in a community that depends heavily on just one bridge, and that bridge goes out, and I don't even mean, God forbid, a case where it collapses, but it's under, so many of you are dealing with this, right? It's in rough enough shape that there have to be load restrictions. And suddenly the vehicle that's taking the goods to the grocery store has to take a 40-minute detour because the next bridge isn't exactly a half mile away in order to get to where it's going. And that is affecting availability, it's affecting prices, and it's affecting, of course, convenience. These are things that are playing out by the thousands. So we're going to make sure that there's funding for the off-system bridges. Just one other note I want to mention on the bridge piece, because I'm excited about this. That 80-20 share, I know 20% doesn't sound a lot here in Washington, but as you know well, putting together that 20% can be a barrier to getting it done. So on those key off-system bridges, we've made that 100% federal, so that you can not have to worry about that when you're programming these things.
That's the type of news we like to hear, Mr. Secretary, and we're just glad that you keep pushing. And I'm gonna keep stressing, having a local official in this role is so key to making sure that our voices are heard. One of the questions is about just the application process, and I'll just give my county as an example. We've been trying to get rail along I-20 for about 40 years, and we're like the last group, community that's been trying for years. And what type of processes can we go through? I know you're looking at cutting some of this red tape, because we got residents who've been in this community underserved for years, and they want to have a chance to create economic development in mixed-use communities and really have the economics come to them like other parts of the county may be prospering. So talk to us about, you know I had to get my heavy rail in there, but
Yeah,
tell us about that.
Good. So look, we've got a rail crossing elimination program, which I think is going to make a big difference, as well as rail expansion programs.
Right.
Through, in some cases, it's the CIG on the transit side. In other cases, things like Chrissy can make a difference. And then the overall, I mean, we're talking about more funding going into rail than any time since Amtrak was created in the first place for the passenger side. So it's an exciting time. The question, of course, is how do we make sure that gets out to the communities? So this is why we're so committed to making the application process as simple as it can be.
Yes.
Obviously, there are standards. I mean, these are federal taxpayer dollars we're talking about. There's going to have to be a high standard. But it doesn't have to be as convoluted as it has been in the past. And that's especially important for communities that don't exactly have a dozen people working full-time in a federal relations shop. It may be 1/2 of one FTE.
Wow.
Right? Or you may hear from companies that would be happy to sell you those services of engaging the federal process, but you're wondering whether you can even afford that kind of help. We've got to make that simpler, and that's a commitment of ours. The other thing I want to mention, we're going to be putting out guidance every week or two on a new program, whether it's the next few days when we're able to announce the mega and infra and rural, whether it's the competitive side of the bridge program, whether it's the charging stations that we're doing, the culverts program. There's a wildlife crossing program to reduce collisions with wildlife, big deal in the western county. Every week or two, you're going to see new news.
Yeah.
But it's young enough in the creation of these programs that it's not too late for us to hear from you on what would make them easier to navigate. We want to hear from NACo, from other local organizations about the biggest pain points that you've encountered knocking on the door of federal agencies like mine to get answers and to get application information so that we design it right the first time.
I love it. I love it. My last question is to you is about the electric charging stations. And we hear about the highways getting it, but how do we make sure Main Street gets it?
This is a great question. So one reason that this is, well, I'll come back to this. Okay, so first of all, we have $5 billion in formula funding going out through the states to make sure we have the backbone of the highway system covered. But we also, to your point, need to make sure that we have community charging too.
Right.
And that's where it's going to really matter to have this extra $2.5 billion that we have in a competitive program. So what we'll do is we'll stack them on top of each other, the network across the highway system, and then support at the community level. Now remember, not all chargers, in fact, arguably very few chargers, need to be owned and operated by any government entity. You can make a buck on chargers, but not everywhere and not always in the right places. What we're trying to do is fill in some of the gaps in a market that has not yet matured so that it is, in fact, nationwide and a fully developed network. Now, one reason I think NACo is an especially important place to talk about this is that even though the kind of traditional cultural attitude about EVs is that we're talking about luxury vehicles for zipping around cities, and they can be, but a lot of the biggest opportunity for EVs is rural, for the simple reason that rural drivers have longer drives. So you burn more gas and diesel, and you're going to save more money if you're charging up with electrons instead of with gas and diesel. It's not free, but it's cheaper. And of course, it's cleaner, which is something we care about. And a majority of rural residents live in single-family homes, which means a lot of folks hear about charging infrastructure and they think it means that to have an electric vehicle, you have to have some elaborate charger. That's true for the fast charging, which we're trying to put in across the highways. But what a lot of people in rural America don't realize is you already have charging infrastructure. It's called the plug in your wall.
Wow.
Right? If you have a single family home and you happen to have a garage or a carport, you've got charging infrastructure right there at your house. And a lot of people don't know that because this is viewed as this luxury item that's not for them. I think as the pickups come onto the market and people see that they have superior towing and torque and you can power your shop tools with them, people are going to get more excited about this. And I think just the commercials in the Super Bowl last night probably did more for this than I ever could.
That's right.
Going around giving speeches. But I'm mentioning this because I want to make sure it's understood how big of an opportunity there is. So the problem, of course, in rural is you also have such long drives that you got to know that there's going to be a charger between you and where you're headed. Now, 200, 300, 400 mile range is what we're talking about. So they're good range, but still, obviously that's an obstacle. In cities, we're seeing kind of the opposite thing. You're less likely to have a single family home where you can just plug your car in overnight. You have multifamily dwellings, not as long trips, but you need some kind of solution for being able to charge.
Right.
We're not going to solve all of these puzzles and tune all of these dials here in Washington. We're inviting the states to come to us with plans that make sense in that state, including how to design the public-private partnership. Should more of the federal dollars go to operations and maintenance, or should more of them go to capital? I don't know. We're going to see what the states come back with and what works best. But, and I'll close on this note, just to tell you one more time how a lot of us are thinking with our local government hat on. In the very unlikely event that your state isn't committed to helping get these chargers out and doesn't come through with a plan, that money doesn't go away, and you will not be punished because your state's not excited about it. Instead, the money changes color, so to speak, and becomes available for direct support to communities that do want to get in on it. So just once again, we are thinking about making sure that we team up with the states as much as possible and that we go direct with local communities whenever you find it necessary. With those two things happening at the same time, I think this can not only be a new day for American infrastructure, but a new day for federalism.
Wow.
With all of the levels of government working together, and that's our commitment, because that's how the president cut his teeth, as you know. That's where I got started, and I'll end where I began. That's where the problems actually get solved, is at your level. So thank you again for everything that you do and for the chance to work on all
Thank you. And Mr. Secretary, I want to say thank you for coming to NACo. We appreciate the time and efforts, because all of these leaders out here, these are the folks where the rubber meets the road, and they're out in the community, and they can tell you from potholes to where the bridges and the sidewalks need to be. We just want to give you an opportunity just to close it out and just, any final words you may have for the nation, the county, the leaders.
So look, if you're in local government, you're in the business of having to manage things you don't necessarily own, or you wind up owning things you don't necessarily control, and never has that been more true than the last 2 years, where everything from public health to infrastructure to public safety has been on everyone's minds in a whole new way, and you and the employees that you oversee and the leaders that you work with are always on the hook for it, and rarely getting the attention that they deserve. And so I'm here in a spirit of gratitude, as well as a spirit of urgency. Again, getting the money lined up was just the first step. Now we have to put those taxpayer dollars to work so that everybody feels the benefit. We can't do it without you, just like we couldn't have got this bill passed without you. But with you, we will have safer, cleaner, more equitable, more economically powerful transportation systems in this country. And I can't wait to see what we're going to be able to deliver working together. So thank you in advance for everything we're going to do. And thank you for
Thank you,
having me
Mr.
today.
Secretary.
Appreciate it.
My man. Let's get this shot together. Appreciate
Thanks
your
again.
time.
Thank you.
See you, sir.
Thank you.
I'll see you soon.